This is our vision as a church, to experience life. All things with Christ, as a thriving family, bringing hope to all people.
Hey everybody, welcome to Services.
We're so glad you're here.
We are.
And I'm glad I'm here. And so are you. On the big screen.
On the big screen. Hey guys, we got some things we want to let you know about. So we've got some new in-depth precept Bible studies that are going to be starting on September 12th and 14th. And they're going to be diving into the book of Revelation as well as 1 Kings. So you'll want to check those out if this is an area that you want to dive into.
Okay, so I got to ask you something.
Sure.
So at the beginning of this, the Bible studies are called a precept Bible study. I haven't ever heard that term before. And so I'm assuming there's a whole bunch of people that have never heard that term before either.
Yes.
Explain.
So what I know of a precept Bible study is it is a deeper dive into the text of these books of the Bible. So you're getting a lot more out, you're taking a lot more time into the different verses in these books.
And there's a Bible study on 1 Kings.
Yes.
All right, so there are a whole bunch of classes that are beginning on September 13th, and that's my birthday. So happy birthday to me. There's a whole bunch of classes. There's a class called Engage that is talking about the different parts for the Christian faith, how truth is truth, how to engage truth, and how to inspire people towards truth. And that's called Engage. That's beginning on September 13th, my birthday. And there's a whole bunch of things that are also beginning on September 13th. So go on the app and site to see all the other classes.
Yes, another class we want to highlight is our Alpha course. And this is a really great class. If you know somebody that is a spiritual seeker, kind of starting to question who is Jesus or the Christian faith, or maybe that's you and you just want to connect with more people here at Christ Community, make sure to check that class out. You can also pick up an invite card at the info desk as you leave the lobby. Hey, also last week we introduced a new ministry that we're going to be launching here on September 14th, and it is a single moms ministry. We know there are a lot of single moms out there in our congregation as well as in the community, moms that you might know that could use some encouragement, some hope.
Some help.
And we want to provide that for them. So starting on the 14th, Wednesday evenings, there's going to be childcare available, a meal, and just time for these moms to get together, encourage one another, and be encouraged.
Yeah, I think the whole solidarity thing is it's
real.
Huge.
Yeah.
Like, to be able to be seen by others and to see others in the same spot, and there's a ton there.
Absolutely. And so if you know a single mom, if you are a single mom, stop by the information desk in the lobby this weekend, go on our website, our app, so you can find more information on this. They are asking that they register just so they know how much food they have, but we would love to connect with you this weekend and give you more information on that.
It is such a gift to be able to be here, to be expectant, to be a part of big things that Jesus is doing. So it is time for service to begin.
Good morning, everyone. I found this guy outside. He was just like walking around. I was like, "Hey, you wanna come and play?" He's like, "Yeah." Everyone knows Matt, right? Come on. Yeah. Anyway. It's so good to, I don't know, I even getting to know you, man. But it's just awesome to be able to lead together and just be in the Lord's presence this morning in rehearsal. And anyway, let's stand together. I just want to start off by reading Psalm 68. Just such an awesome picture of just as David looks at God and who he is and just a declaration of the nature of God. Let God arise, let his enemies be scattered. Let those also who hate him flee before him. As smoke is driven away, so drive them away. As wax melts before the fire, so let the wicked perish at the presence of God. But let the righteous be glad. Let them rejoice before God. Yes, let them rejoice exceedingly. Sing to God, sing praises to his name. Extol him who rides on the clouds. By his name Yahweh, and rejoice before him. A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in his holy habitation. God sets the solitary in families. He brings out those who are bound into prosperity, but the rebellious dwell on a dry and weary land. O God, I just ask, Lord, right now, Lord, as we just come together, Lord, I just lift you up and I ask God this morning for a revelation of who you are, Lord, in a deeper, more impactful way in our lives. We lift you up this morning, Jesus, and we ask, God, that as we worship you, Lord, you would let your presence, Lord, fill this place. Oh, he is holy, he is worthy. Yes, he is holy, he is worthy. Worthy are you, Lord, a father to the fatherless. You see the brokenhearted, you lift us up. Oh, higher than the mountains that I face, stronger than the power of the grave. You're constant in the trial and the change. This one thing, it remains. Yes, this one thing remains. Sing it out. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Come on. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. And on and on and on and on it goes. And it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid. This one thing, it remains. This one thing, it remains. Yes, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Oh, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid. Yes, my debt is paid. There's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. And my debt is paid. There is nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. Oh, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Yes, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Oh, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love, oh, your love. Yes, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love, let's sing this truth. It never runs out on me. Yes, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your and there is nothing that can separate my heart from your great love.
In pursuit of us, seeking us out. And Jesus, we ask that in this moment, our hearts would be receptive to receive the things that you want to speak to us. And we confess that there are so many things happening in our lives right now that have the ability to distract us, to keep us from hearing your voice. But in this moment, in this place, would you silence those things so that we could hear you and you alone? And so, Jesus, we are here, we are expectant of you to move, and so we ask that you would do that. We pray this in your name. Amen. Amen. Well, y'all can go ahead and grab a seat. If you guys don't know me, my name is Nate. Hello. All right, so 4 of you said hello. That's great. Perfect start, just what I'm looking for. No, I'm kidding. Hey, so before we begin today, I want to give you guys a couple updates on just my summer, because many of you have been pulling me aside in the lobby, asking me about certain things, and I figured I've got a captive audience, so I've probably, let y'all know right now. This was a crazy summer for my family on a couple different multiple fronts. Our youngest kid, Carson, you've probably seen her maybe if you've been around on Sundays before. She's a little fiery redhead. She ended up in Children's Hospital for multiple weeks, and it was crazy, tough, challenging journey. But I wanted to let you know that 2 weeks ago, she had a surgery, fixed all her issues, and she is now fully back to her crazy, rambunctious self. So she's good. Praise God for that. Other update is this. So a couple years ago, my wife and I, our family, we began this journey with foster care. We've just always had a heartbeat for that, bringing a kid into our family to be a healthy family for a kid who needs that. Well, back in the middle of July, we adopted our foster daughter, Brianna. And she is no longer our foster daughter. She's just our daughter. So another big life update there. But the reason I wanted to bring this stuff up is because these have been some really significant events that we've walked through. One of them very beautiful and one of them very challenging. And through all of that, we have felt so loved by our church family here. The amount of people who reached out to us to offer to bring us food, the amount of people who reached out to watch my kids, and I've got 4 other kids besides the one who ended up in the hospital, right? That's a really big offer. The amount of gift cards sent, because we were going back and forth from Denver Children's every day for 2 weeks. We felt so seen, and we felt so known and so loved, and I just want to say thank you. We love our church. We love that we get to be a part of this community. And I just want to say, if you're new here, or maybe you've been here for a while, but you haven't yet jumped into a community, can I just encourage you to do that? Right? The things that we walked through this summer were so challenging, but one of the things that made it so much easier to navigate was knowing that we weren't alone in it. You see, when you're seen, when you're known by the people who are around you, you're able to be loved. And not only does it make the hard times a little bit easier, it also makes the great times that much better. And so get jumped in, right? It's kind of feels like we're starting a new year here, right? We got Labor Day. There's probably a lot of people up in the mountains, but after Labor Day is when we feel like we can re-engage life in a normal way. So if community has not been a part of that, I just encourage you, jump in a group, jump in a class, begin serving in a ministry. I promise you, your life will be better and more richer because of it. Amen. That's right. Hey, by the way, if you guys like saying amen in church, that's a cool thing. You guys can do that. We can be participating together. So thank you. That was awesome. Hey, before we dive into the message, actually, no, we are diving into the message now, so never mind. So a couple years ago, I had this opportunity to do something really cool that I think a lot of people really should do in their life at some point, and that is go to Israel. Right now, when I was in Israel, I got to go to some really amazing places, but the things that I remember most about this trip, it wasn't the places that we went to, it was actually the experiences that I had while I was there, because some of these experiences, they allowed me this unique opportunity to see some of these things Jesus taught and did, to see them in a brand new light that helped them come to life for me. And one of the most significant encounters or experiences I had, it actually involved sheep. I know, who would have figured? All right, so one day we were out in the desert, and it's really, really, really hot in the desert. And while we were out there, we ran into this group of Bedouins. Now, I'm willing to bet that most of you guys don't know what a Bedouin is, but it is this group of people. They're nomadic, meaning they don't have a place that they actually live, and they have held on to their ancient kind of practices, right? So they live in tents, they take care of sheep. Their life, it's really, really simple. And so what they do is they take all their sheep to a place, they eat all of the grass that is there, and then when the grass is gone, they pick up everything they own and they move to a new place. So when we ran into these Bedouins, they offered us this opportunity to go into their tent with them and to drink tea and eat bread. And I was like, sure. I mean, when in Israel, do what people do in Israel, I guess. I don't know these people, but bread sounds good. And so as I was walking into their tent, I noticed that just outside of it, they had this large stone structure that they had built with these massive rocks. And it was kind of shaped like a square, and on the front of this thing, there was this gate. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I can't imagine they carry that with them, right? These rocks have to be 100, 150 pounds, and there's like a lot of them. And so I asked the Bedouins, I say, hey, what is this? Right? Because I see how you can carry a tent, but this, like, help me understand. They say, oh, no, we build this every place we go. This is where our sheep stay. This is a sheep pen. And it's really got two purposes, right? One, at night we put the sheep in there, it keeps them in, they can't knock stuff over. But more importantly, it keeps the predators out, right? This is basically a safe haven for our animals to protect them. Now, here's why I bring this up, right? Here's why I was thinking about this as I was getting ready for this message. We've been in this series for a couple months now on the Gospel of John, very creative title. It's called John. And in this gospel, you've got the Apostle John, who is writing this letter to a group of people trying to convince them that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus is the hope for humanity. And in this gospel that was written, like, we find a whole bunch of stuff that Jesus said and a whole bunch of stuff that Jesus did. Now, in the text that we're going to be looking at today, which is John 10, 1-21, Jesus is actually going to use the imagery of a sheep pen, right? Which is that thing that the Bedouins had outside of their house. And this imagery of a shepherd to help us understand not only who we are, but more importantly, who he is. To understand what he came to do and to understand his character and his heartbeat. And what we're going to find is that what Jesus says here in John 10, it's actually really significant. And it's not just significant because of what Jesus says, it's also significant because of when he says it. All right, now this exchange that we're going to look at, it's coming right after this confrontation that happened between a man who had been blind that Jesus had healed and these Pharisees who took issue with it. And that whole interaction, it really brought up this question for everybody who was there. Who is Jesus? Right, that's a pretty significant question, right? That's a question that matters. It's a question that all of us have to wrestle with. Now, this man who had been healed, he saw Jesus for who he was. He looked at Jesus and he said, this is the Messiah. And the reason he came to that conclusion is because he knew healing people who are blind, restoring sight to somebody who has never had sight in their entire life, that is not something your average person could do. That is something that only somebody who is from God could do. But the Pharisees, well, they rejected that. They rejected Jesus, right? They had this kind of idea of what a Messiah was going to look like. They had this whole religious system set up for how you're supposed to be able to connect with God. And Jesus, in his teachings and in his ministry, he was challenging all of that. So instead of changing their own perception and their own views, they decided to reject Jesus and say that he was from the devil. Now, Jesus, he was apparently aware of everything that was happening in this interaction. And there were some Pharisees who were near him, and so he decides to engage in a conversation with them. And this is what he says in verse 1. He says, very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. All right, so what Jesus is doing here is he's giving us a parable. And a parable is simply this. It's a story using common language and common situations to help people see a deeper truth. And sheep and shepherds and sheep pens, there was nothing more common than this in that time in Israel. Now, it's important going into this thing that Jesus is about to say that we remember that question that everybody was asking back in chapter 9. Is Jesus from God? Is he the Messiah? Is he the long-awaited prophet? Because what Jesus is saying here is really answering that question that they're asking over there. Now, as we dive into this, it's helpful to know that in the Old Testament, this imagery of a shepherd being with his sheep was actually pretty significant. It was an image that was often used to symbolize the relationship between the true king of Israel and the people of Israel. Right? There was a humility about this image. There was a compassion about this image. And for the people of Israel, it was so rooted even in their own history as they think about King David, right? The great King David of history, who himself was a shepherd. Now, in our world today, that image maybe doesn't really resonate with us, right? Because when we think about a leader, we're more focused on looking for the individual who is strong. We want the individual who is dominating, who is powerful, who is in control. But back then, the ideal king, he was pictured as the exact opposite. It wasn't somebody who was there to dominate the people. It was actually somebody who was there to serve the people. See, everyone knew that a shepherd embodied the heart of a true leader. They knew that ultimately that is what they needed in a king. And so it's no accident that this is the image that Jesus picks to focus on when he starts talking about his own claim to be the true king of Israel. But before he even gets there, he starts off by using this parable about shepherds and sheep. And remember, the purpose of a parable, it's to create common ground, right? He wanted to create some common ground with these Pharisees who were in front of them so that they could actually begin understanding and talking about this same thing. So Jesus starts by talking about true shepherds and false shepherds. You got true shepherds, and then you've got these other ones who are thieves, robbers, and liars. Now you're probably wondering, well, who are the robbers and liars, right? Who are the robbers and the thieves that Jesus is talking about? Well, he's probably talking about two different groups of people. First is this, it's the people who are trying to claim that title of leader. Right? It's the people who are trying to be the ones saying that God has sent me, right? This was probably the revolutionary leaders at that time, right? People who tried to rise up in military power to overthrow the Roman people with the goal of trying to force these Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah to come to fruition, to try to bring the kingdom by force. Right, in history, you can read all about the Maccabees and what happened there. In Jesus' own time, there were the Sicarii, right? There were so many people who wanted to use a political and military revolution to bring the kingdom of God here to earth. But what Jesus would say is this, is like, no, that's not the real shepherd. Right? These aren't people taking you where my Father really wants you to go. These are thieves. These are robbers. These are people who have their own agenda. That's the first group. But there's also another group that Jesus was probably talking about, and that's the religious leaders. For example, the Pharisees who were sitting there right in front of him. Right? The Pharisees were a group of people who had allied themselves with the Roman Empire. They had betrayed their own people for their own gain. They just wanted to retain their power and their wealth and their influence under the Roman rule, and so they sold the people of Israel out so that they could advance. They didn't love the sheep. They didn't care about the sheep. They wanted to use the sheep. Now, these two groups of people, right, the ones who try to take power and the ones who are abusing the sheep, while they might say they're for the people, Jesus is pointing out the reality that at the end of the day, they're not. It doesn't matter what they say about who they are. They are false shepherds. They are thieves. They are robbers. I think the implicit question that Jesus is going after is this. In a world where so many people are claiming this title, how can you tell who the real shepherd is? How can you tell who you're actually supposed to be following? And Jesus gives us a simple answer to that question. He says that you know who the true shepherd is because the sheep know the shepherd's voice and they follow it. Now, when I was with the Bedouins out in the desert, I got to witness what Jesus meant here firsthand. After we'd finished eating our bread and drinking our tea, we went outside, and we were like a group of 50 rambunctious, loud college students, right? And so we made a lot of noise, and when we got out there, guess what we saw in the distance? We saw the shepherd bringing all of his sheep back in from the wilderness. Now, that's a pretty cool sight to see. And so what are we doing? We're sitting there, we're taking pictures, we're laughing, we're making jokes, really, really loud. But the sheep, they weren't distracted by us at all. You see, the shepherd, he was actually walking in front of the sheep. And as he was walking in front of them, he was calling out to them. The Bedouins actually told us that the shepherd was calling those sheep out by name. Like, he literally knew every one of his sheep's name. And these sheep, even though there was this group of us who were being loud and distracting and taking pictures, they didn't care about any of that. They weren't looking at us. They weren't thinking about us because their attention was focused only on the shepherd who was in front of them. You see, they knew the shepherd, they trusted the shepherd, and because they heard his voice calling out their name, no matter how many other distractions were there with a bunch of, American rambunctious college kids, they followed the shepherd they knew. What Jesus is implying is that when we as his people, right, when we as his sheep hear his voice, the way that the world knows who the true shepherd is because we are following him. We're not getting distracted by the things that are around us. The real sheep, they hear the shepherd and they follow the shepherd. This is something that every Pharisee there should have understood. But apparently, they didn't. We see that in the next verse. It says that Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees, they did not understand what he was telling them. Right? So again, this is kind of basically the MO of the religious leaders all throughout the Gospel of John. They are completely missing the point of everything that Jesus is saying. But what I love is that doesn't deter Jesus, right? He has a mission, he has a thing he wants to communicate, and so he kind of doubles down and he continues to teach because Jesus wants to answer that question from chapter 9 about who he is. He wants to let people know what he's really about. And so in the next verse, he continues by saying this. He says, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." All right, so now Jesus is kind of build upon this image that he started to outline in the parable in verses 1 to 5. And first, to do that, he says this. He says, okay, so I am the gate. Now remember, the purpose of the gate in the sheep pen was to keep the predators out and to keep the sheep in. It was to be this safe haven. It was to be a buffer from the dangers of the world. And what Jesus is saying here is that for his sheep, he's that buffer. He's the gate. He's the one who protects them. He's the one who keeps them kind of contained. He holds them together. And then he goes on to say that his sheep, they're not going to listen to the thieves and the liars who are trying to harm them. They're only going to listen to the shepherd. All right, Jesus is going to continue to say this all throughout this parable. He's going to say the sheep listen, the sheep listen, the sheep listen, the sheep hear the shepherd. And contrast this with the Pharisees who he's talking to, who hear, but they don't really hear. They miss the point. Jesus is really ultimately trying to draw this line in the sand between this old religious system and the way people operated and then this new thing. All right, but we're going to get to that a little later. So Jesus says, okay, so my sheep hear me, and then he goes on to make a promise. He says, if you're one of my sheep, if you hear my voice, here's the promise I make you. You will be saved. In other words, this is a promise Jesus is making to protect those who are his, to take care of them, to take them to the places they ultimately needed to go. And there's an agenda here, right? There's something that Jesus is really after, and that is this. He wants those who are his to experience life. And he doesn't want them just to experience a mediocre life. He wants them to experience life to the full. Now remember, this whole parable, it wasn't just targeted to his followers, it was actually targeted at the Pharisees, the religious leaders. And this is significant because these are the people who thought they were the gate. They thought that they were the gatekeepers. They thought that their religious system was the way for people to experience life. But what Jesus is saying here is that they've got it all wrong. Religion is not the answer. The religious system and following all the rules and doing all the things the law tells you to do, that is not the answer. Jesus says, if you want to experience life, that's only going to happen through me. You see, Jesus is challenging the very foundation on which their entire lives had been built. And they didn't like that. Well, in the next few verses, Jesus is going to make another claim. And again, this is answering that question from chapter 9 about who he really is. And this claim he's going to make, it's going to be pretty obvious what Jesus is saying, right? Remember that imagery that the Israelites had of the true king, that he's a shepherd? You're going to see Jesus is basically telling everyone, that's me. You see, up till this point in John, Jesus has been hinting at who he is, but now he's going to become very explicit. We see it in verse 11 when he says this, I am the good shepherd. All right, you can't get any plainer than that. He comes out and he says that I am the good shepherd. And then he goes on to talk about what the good shepherd does. He says that the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and he runs away. And then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Right now, did you notice the word that Jesus used in conjunction with that word shepherd to talk about who he is? Right? He didn't say, I am just the shepherd. Didn't say that I am just a mediocre shepherd. He said, I am the good shepherd. Right? And that's intentional. You see, back then when the shepherds had this large flock, 200, 300, 400 sheep, they would need help keeping an eye on them, right? The shepherd would always be out in front calling back to the sheep, calling them out by name, and they'd follow. But they still needed people near the back of this flock to keep an eye out for danger, to look for wolves, to look and see if maybe one of the sheep had strayed. Now, these shepherds, they were, really good. And the hired hands, they were okay. And they were great when there was no danger. But the moment something happened where things got scary, most of these hired hands, they would run away. They weren't going to risk their lives for the flock because it wasn't theirs. And look, we get this, don't we? I mean, in our lives, there are a lot of things that we're a part of, maybe our jobs or our hobbies that we're really interested in. Maybe we're even marginally invested in it. But the moment when that thing gets hard, the moment when that thing demands more of us than we're willing to give, the moment that thing gets dangerous, we're out of there. We don't have a vested interest in that thing. But then we know that there are these other things in life. Maybe our family, our relationship with a significant other, our relationship with our children. When things get hard, we don't walk away. Right? When things get hard, we don't run away. Instead, we actually confront that danger. And we face that issue head on because we know that ultimately that person or that thing is worth it. You see, in this culture, a good shepherd would fall in that second category. A good shepherd would always be there for his sheep. He wouldn't abandon them. He wouldn't leave them defenseless. Instead, he would stand by them. He would protect them. He'd even be willing to lay down his life for them. And what Jesus is saying here is that is what he is willing to do for his people. You see, in verse 10, Jesus said exactly what he wants, right? He wants us to experience life. And then in verse 11, he tells us what he's willing to give up and to do to make sure that happens. He says he is willing to give his life up for us. Maybe you're here today and that's the only thing you need to hear. To know that no matter what you've done, no matter the decisions that you've made, no matter what kind of danger you're in right now, right? Whether it's your fault or somebody else's, maybe you just need to know that Jesus is there for you. That he's not going to give up on you. That he's not going to abandon you. But that he's for you. And he'll fight for you. In the next verse, Jesus goes on to describe more about the kind of shepherd he is. He says again, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there should be one flock and one shepherd. All right, so Jesus begins by reiterating the things he's been saying since the beginning, right? He knows his sheep know him. But then he says something about this relationship that I think is really cool. See, he says that this relationship that's going to exist between him and his people, it's going to be very similar to this relationship that he has with his Father. And that's a familial relationship. It's not like this relationship between a servant and a king where it's just go do my bidding. No, Jesus is saying is that this relationship, it's going to have intimacy. This relationship, there's going to be a deep love. That is what he is actually inviting us into. It's not like this old Jewish way of thinking where it was like, all right, I got to bend my knee, I got to bow, I got to follow every rule, or God's going to be mad at me. Jesus is saying, no, I am inviting you into my family. And then once again, Jesus talks about laying down his life. But this time it's a little bit different. You see, last time Jesus said a good shepherd is willing to lay down his life. But here in verse 15, Jesus says he's actually going to do that. You see, here Jesus is pointing to the cross. He's pointing towards what's coming at the end of the Gospel of John. And honestly, I love this about Jesus. You see, Jesus knew why he came. He knew what his mission was. And no matter what happened, he wasn't distracted from it. You see, all throughout the gospel, you'll see this language that John puts in there, that Jesus' heart was set on Jerusalem, that his eyes were set on Jerusalem. You see, he knew that there was this thing that his Father had called him to do, and that was to be the one who came and rescued those who were his. And he was not going to allow anything to distract him from that. Now, this thing that Jesus came to do, it was a whole lot bigger than what most people thought. You see, in verse 16, Jesus says something that probably would have offended almost every single religious leader who was there. He said, yes, I'm here to rescue my sheep that are a part of this tribe, but there's also sheep that aren't here right now. There are also sheep who are not yet a part of this pen that I need to go after so they can all be a part of my flock. I need to get them all together. And you're probably wondering, well, why is that offensive? Well, in this time, the religious leaders and most of the Israelites in general thought that they alone were the chosen ones of God. Right? That in a world of brokenness, they were going to be the sole recipients of God's favor and God's blessing. And a big part of why they thought that is because of this initial promise that God had made to Abraham back in Genesis 12, where he told Abraham that he was going to bless him and his descendants, which is true. It is. But if you read the second part of that, you would see that there was a reason God was going to do this. He said, yes, I'm going to bless you, Abraham. Yes, I'm going to bless your descendants. But the reason I'm going to do that is so that through you, I could bless the entire world. So think about that in the context of what Jesus is saying here. He came so that people could experience life, or in other words, to be blessed. And he's a descendant of Abraham. And then he goes on to say that this thing he wants to do, right, this helping people experience life, helping people be blessed, it's not going to be just for the tribe of Israel. It's actually going to be for all people. You see, Jesus is making it so clear here that this new kingdom, it's not just regional, it's actually global. And this would have been offensive to everybody who held on to this old religious system because it was taking this thing that they thought gave them privileged access to God, and it was opening it up to everyone. Meaning that these people who the Israelites saw as being undesirables or outcasts, these people who didn't live up to their standards were going to be invited into the family of God just like them. And what's so ironic is that this thing that was so offensive to the religious leaders, it was actually good news to everyone else in the world because it meant that those who were on the outside were being invited into the family. That's good news. That's what the word gospel means. To know that there is a good shepherd seeking us out, bringing us into his fold, making us family, saving us. Friends, this is good news. Jesus wraps up this parable by saying this. He says, the reason that my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. All right, so Jesus closes this out by talking about this unique relationship that he has with the Father. And then once again, he's pointing towards the crucifixion that's coming. And this is now the third time in 21 verses that Jesus has referenced his death. He begins by saying, hey, a good shepherd is willing to die. And then he goes on to say, hey, you know what? I am going to die. And then he repeats that same thing he said the second time here and the third time, saying, yes, I'm going to die. But then he says probably the most important thing that's ever been said. He says, yes, I'm going to die. But I'm not going to stay dead. You see, I've got the authority to take my life back up again. Here, Jesus is not only pointing to the crucifixion, he's also pointing to the resurrection. He's letting everyone know, like, look, death, it has no control over me. You may be able to kill me, but I'm coming back. Jesus is claiming authority over his own life. And that is so significant, right? Because these religious leaders, they were the ones who thought they had all the power. They thought that Jesus' life was in their hands, and yet here Jesus is saying, no, that is not true. Nobody can take my life from me. Nobody can do anything to me that my Father has not already willed and allowed. My life is not going to be stolen. Instead, it's going to be given as a ransom. It's going to be given freely so that my sheep, so that my people can experience life. I think that with this statement coming at the end of this whole description of the type of shepherd Jesus is going to be, I feel like Jesus is letting us know that no matter what, he's not going to walk away from us. Right? Because Jesus never, he didn't do this thing where he gives this whole description of the kind of shepherd he's going to be and says, yeah, then I'm going to die, then I'm going to go away. No, like Jesus is talking about the things that he's going to be doing and the things that he's going to continue doing for his people. He said, I am going to be the good shepherd. Not I'm going to be a good shepherd for a little while. Jesus is talking about this is who I am for all time. He wants us to know that no matter what happens, he's not going to abandon us. He wants the people to know that no matter what happens, he's not going to leave them on their own. He's telling them that, yes, I may die. Yes, you may crucify me, but that's not going to stop me from doing this thing that I'm committed to doing, which is caring for you. I will be the good shepherd that you need. And friends, I don't know about you, but this gives me hope. This is such a hope-filled statement, and not just for what happens once we die. This is about what happens today. Friends, Jesus is not distant. He has not left us on our own. As our shepherd, he is present. He's here in the good times. He's here in the bad times. He's here in the easy times. He's here in the hard times. He hasn't abandoned us. He's still looking out for us. He cares for us. He knows us. Maybe you're at a spot in your life right now where you just need to hear that. Maybe there's something hard that you're walking through, and you just need to be reminded today that God is with you. He hasn't left you on your own to try to figure this out. He is right there in the midst of whatever that thing is that you're walking through. And look, friends, I'm not just saying this because I have to say it as a pastor. I'm not. I'm saying this because I know it's true. This is something that I have experienced in my life in such a tangible way over the last few months. When our daughter ended up in the hospital, that was one of the scariest moments we've ever experienced as a family. When we took her there and she's got 107 fever and the doctors have no idea why. Like as a parent, you just feel so helpless. And then when you hold your kid as they're screaming out, crying, just begging you to make it better, and you can't do anything. I mean, those first few nights, we legitimately thought we were going to lose her. It was hard. It was difficult. But here's what I can tell you, even with how hard that was, even with how difficult that was, my wife and I, we never felt like we were alone. Every step of the way, we felt the presence of the Good Shepherd with us, comforting us, reminding us that we weren't on our own, reminding us that he is for us and he wouldn't abandon us. And look, it didn't make everything easier, but it helped us take the next step. This whole parable, it gives us such a clear picture of who Jesus is and what he's about. But here's what's fascinating to me, right? Here's why I don't understand how the Pharisees missed it. Everything that Jesus said here, it was actually what the people of God were waiting for. Back in Ezekiel 34, God spoke through the prophet Ezekiel, basically telling the people like, hey, your religious leaders have messed up. Like, they haven't been good shepherds. So you know what? One day I'm going to come and I am going to be the good shepherd myself. And I am going to care for you. This is what God said. He said, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so I will look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines and in the settlements in the land. I will tend them in a good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. I will shepherd the flock with justice. This is what God said. He said, I will search for my sheep. I will look after them. I will rescue them. I will tend them. I will search for the lost. I'm going to bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured. I will strengthen the weak. Now, remember that question that everybody was asking in chapter 9 about Jesus? Was he the one they were waiting for? Was he the true shepherd of Israel, the true king? Was he the one who would embody everything that was spoken about in Ezekiel? Well, not only is Jesus saying here in John 10 that he is in fact the true king, but if you look at everything that he's done up till this point, it has fulfilled exactly what God had said he would do all the way back in Ezekiel. You see, Jesus sought out the Samaritan woman in John 4. He rescued the woman caught in adultery in John 8. He tended to the masses when he fed the 5,000 in John 6. He healed the son of the Roman centurion, a man who is the very definition of being lost in John 4. He healed the lame man who was injured by the pool of Bethesda in John 5. And he strengthened the faith of the man born blind in John 9. Jesus is the true shepherd. There's no denying what Jesus meant here. He was making a claim, I am the one you have been waiting for. And so people had to decide, do they embrace that? Or do they reject it? This passage closes by saying this. It says, the Jews who heard these words were again divided. Many of them said, he is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him? But others said, these are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Friends, no matter where you are at right now in life, no matter what it is that you're walking through, please know this. If you are lost, if you're in a place of confusion and desperation, Jesus is searching for you. He loves you. He wants you. If you're in a place where you're feeling hopeless because you're overwhelmed and you don't know how you're going to make everything in your life happen, know this. Jesus is looking out for you. You're his child. And he cares about you. If you're feeling stuck and trapped, know that Jesus will rescue you. He's not going to abandon you in that place. If you're experiencing sickness, if you're experiencing brokenness, know that Jesus wants to meet you in that and he wants to heal you. If you're feeling lonely, know that Jesus will show up and he will care for you. No matter what it is you're walking through right now, Jesus sees you. Jesus knows you. Friends, the shepherd is calling out to us this morning. Jesus is calling out to you. Can you hear him? Let's pray. You know, one of the things that we always want to make sure we do as a church is give ourselves time to respond to the things that the Spirit is speaking. We don't want to just rush from one thing to the next. And Lord, we know that you're here. We know that you're moving, that you're stirring in our hearts. And so in this space, would you meet with us? Would you speak to us? Maybe there's some of you here right now that in the past have heard the voice of the shepherd. You've heard Jesus speak, but if you're being honest, it's been a while. In this space, would you ask Jesus to come and find you? To lead you back into his fold, into his embrace, so that you could experience the life that he wants. If there are things that have been distracting you, ask him to show you what those are so that you can get back to that place you belong, which is with him. And another question to ask Jesus in this moment is this: where do you want me to go? Where are you leading me? Jesus, you are the good shepherd. You are full of grace and compassion and love. You are one that we can trust. And so, Jesus, would you give us the courage to do that? To not only say that with our minds, but to believe that with our hearts. Jesus, would you lead us to the place you need us to be? And will we be able to trust that that place is ultimately the best place for us? You are a good shepherd, Father. You are a good Father, and you love us. Help us trust that. Jesus, thank you for pursuing us. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for caring for us. In this time, as we sing and as we worship, would you just continue to call out to us, continue to minister to us, to speak to us, and to lead us to that place of rest, to that place of pasture.
Here I am, here you are. I give all of me for all you are. I don't unless you go with me. One thing I ask, one thing I see, show me your glory. You're all I want, you're all I need. Show me your glory.
You are good, good to me. With every step, I'll let your spirit lead. Valleys low or on mountain peaks, I'll follow you, 'cause I know you'll never leave.
One thing I ask, one thing I see, show me your glory. You're all I want, you're all I need. Show me your glory. One thing I ask, one thing I ask, one thing I see, show me your glory. You're all I want, you're all I need. Show me your glory. You're all I need. Show me your glory. My heart and flesh cry, show me your glory. So shallow you will light up, mountain you will climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you will light up, mountain you will climb up, coming after me. So you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good.
Yes, you have,
to
God.
me.
Yes, you have.
Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to
Come on,
me.
let's sing this out.
Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. Yeah. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, and leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, you're coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, you're coming after me. Come on. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, you're coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, you're coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, you're coming after me. The overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, it leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. I don't deserve it, I couldn't earn it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Come on, let's sing it. Turn your eyes. Oh, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. Oh, and the things of earth will grow strangely
the eyes of our understanding, as Paul writes in Romans, place them on Jesus right now. Let's just ask God, open the eyes of our hearts to see Jesus. Look to you, Jesus. Love you, Jesus. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come quickly. Your will be done the same on earth as it is in heaven. Let heaven come to earth as it is in heaven. Let heaven come. Oh, let heaven come. Let's just agree with Jesus' prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come quickly. Your will be done the same on earth as it is in heaven. Let heaven come to earth as it is in heaven. Let heaven come. Let heaven come. For yours is the kingdom, yours is the power, yours is the glory forever. Amen. Yours is the kingdom, yours is the power, yours is the glory forever. Amen. Yours is the kingdom, yours is the power, yours is the glory forever. Amen. Yes, yours is the kingdom, yours is the
is yours is the kingdom, yours is the power, yours is the glory forever. Amen. On earth as it is in heaven, let heaven come to earth as it is in heaven, let heaven come.
Jesus, yours is the kingdom, the glory, the power. You alone are worthy of our honor and our praise. Well, church, even though our corporate time of worship gathered together is coming to a close, there are still so many ways that we can continue to worship as we leave this place. All right, it's not just a Sunday thing. This is a lifestyle thing. And one of the ways you could do that is maybe this message stirred something up in you today. Maybe the Lord met you and said like, hey, there's some stuff you got to work on. We want to let you know that we've got folks here who would consider it an honor to be able to pray with you. They're in the back of the room, and they would consider it a joy to sit with you and to walk with you through whatever it is that you're dealing with right now. All right, this is why we've been gathered together as a community. God has called us to do life together, not life alone. So if you need that, it is available for you. Another way to worship is through giving. And there are so many ways to do that online or here in the back. But I just want to tell you that when you give to Christ Community, you're giving to the mission of the kingdom. In that video, the welcome video at the beginning, KJ and Jenny had shared about this new ministry we're launching for single moms. And for me, this is a personal ministry. When I met my wife, when she was before we got married, she was actually a single mom. And I met her at church. And the only reason that my wife was at church is because when she got pregnant, instead of rejecting her and telling her everything she had done wrong, this church decided to come around her and to love her and to embrace her and to remind her of who she is and who she is. Like for me, that's what the kingdom is. That's what the kingdom does. We seek out those who are lost. And I'm just so excited that our church is saying yes to that we've got a group of women who've said, we want to go love those that nobody else is loving right now. We want to pursue those that nobody else is pursuing because that's what Jesus does. And so when you give, that's what this enables. It is life change. It is people being built up and told they matter. And so just from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for saying yes to people and saying yes to the kingdom. Well, the last way that you could worship, it's not going to sound like a way to worship, but I really think it is. It's just as you leave this place, enjoy the people who are around you. All right, build relationships, talk, laugh, get to know people. Something really beautiful happens when we live in community with others and when we're known and seen. And so as we end, let me dismiss you with a blessing. Brothers, sisters, would you go from this place knowing that you have a Father who sees you? Would you go knowing that you have a Father who knows you, a Father who loves you? And would you walk in the power of His Holy Spirit as you follow Him where He leads, knowing that all things are working for your good and for His glory? Go in peace.